go ahead and introduce the three speakers. First of all, the format had changed a little bit. And again, I think this is okay. We have now combined two papers into one. Professor Sthaneshwar, Timilsina, and Professor Jeffrey Lidke are going to talk jointly as a dialogical format. So they are going to like interchange of ideas, being the same subject matter. So only different is Professor Miroj Shakya will be talking toward the end only on Buddhism. So let's put together Sthaneshwar, Timilsina, and Jeffrey Lidke before talking about the goddess traditions in Nepal. So let's, without wasting too much of our time, because we already did. So so let's Sarvamanaya Tantra of Nepal going to talk by these two great scholars whom I respect, and so let's the Zoom podium, the Zoom screen is yours now. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Deepak. It's an honor to be here. We were assuming 40 minutes for the combined talk. What is our situation at this point?
Let's see, we lost several minutes because I have to be on another 9:35 panel. So, so today, right now is 8:35. So if we could wrap it up in about 20 minutes, would that give you? I know that's tough.
Yeah, we'll do our best. Okay, well, it's an honor to be here. I'm going to dive right in. We are discussing together on the Sarvamnaya Tantric tradition of Nepal. We wanted to provide a kind of brief historical overview, a quick kind of synthesis analysis of the tradition. And then I want to hand it over to Sthaneshwar, who's going to take us into a deep dive on the Kali Kula, addressing topics about the connection of Trika Kashmir Shaivism to the Nepali Sarvamnaya. And as time allows, we were going to have a little bit of a back and forth question and answer regarding insider-outsider dynamics, the nature of consciousness, and the value of a vibrant living tradition, and how we as scholars and practitioners might benefit from it. I would like to ask that everyone who's not speaking, please mute yourself, such as Tulsi Ramachandran. Please mute. It's very difficult to hear if we don't mute. Thank you. So here is an important textual passage. Sthaneshwar and I have both published fairly extensively on the Sarvamnaya, and you can see other sources. Here we have reference to a complete diksha or initiation through a Mahapaduka initiation linked to a mantra, the Mahashodashi, that interweaves all of the revelations. This is a 16th century reference that shows us that this idea of a Sarvamnaya, or a revelation that is total or complete or includes all revelations, is in place in the subcontinent by at least 400 years ago. We understand that the Sarvamnaya has a very important place within that kind of total system of revelation throughout the subcontinent, placing the northern or Uttara revelation in Nepal itself, which we see as also a center point and synthesis of traditions of revelation coming from Kashmir in the west, from South India, and also from Bengal. Part of what makes Nepal so extraordinary is that these revelations grounded in tantric texts and also associated with the related cultural and religious traditions have been preserved in Nepal in a way that we don't see in other regions of the subcontinent. Many, many thousands of manuscripts preserved at the Nepal National Archives, as scholars like Sanderson and Ditchkowski have reiterated, a true treasure trove of padditis and other tantric texts. Moreover, one of the most important pitas and places of worship, of temple complexes, is the Pashupatinath complex in the Kathmandu Valley, which has drawn seekers of Tantra from across the subcontinent for hundreds of years. And in that complex, we have a Panchamukha linga, a five-faced linga. This is not that linga itself. It's a similar appearing linga. The importance here is this idea of a Shiva, a Lord whose five faces plus his upper face becomes the source of scriptural revelation. And we add to that even a bottom face, an under face, giving in all 6 streams of revelation. These 6 streams of revelation are preserved in Nepali Sarvamnaya Tantra, known by some as Shadamnaya Tantra, or the Tantra of the 6 revelations. Sarvamnaya is the idea of the inclusion of all the revelations, and it is an idea that we see embodied in symbols like the Sri Yantra, which indicate the 4 directions, as well as the symbolism of an upward face and a foundation. Part of what's so rich about the Sarvamnaya Tantra is it preserves a very deep esoteric yoga tradition. When we look at this system, it reminds us of the sophisticated mysticism of great tantric masters like Abhinavagupta. And in this system, it's understood that the 6 revelations correspond to the chakras of the body, and each revelation has a corresponding deity and chakra. So we look here, first of all, at the bottom revelation, the Adha Amnaya, associated with Vajra Yogini, sometimes also referred to as Hatikeshi. And then the Purva Amnaya, associated with Panchamukhi Devi, sometimes referred to as Purneshwari, associated with the Swadhisthana chakra. The Dakshinamnaya, associated with Dakshina Kali or Nisheshwara, associated with the Manipura chakra. The Paschimamnaya, Kubjika Devi or Kubjeshwari, associated with the Anahata chakra. The Uttaramnaya, associated with Guyeshwari, also known as Siddheshwari, and having important connections to Kala Samkarshini of the Trika tradition, associated with the Vishuddha chakra. And finally, the Urdhva Amnaya, also Tripurasundari or Kameshwara, associated with the Ajna chakra. So this is a kind of brief overview, and now I want to hand it over to Sthaneshwar Timilsina, my teacher, my guru, in my assessment, the single greatest scholar of Sarvamnaya Tantra alive, and invite him to please talk to us about particularly the Kali Krama associated with Guyeshwari.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate all of you for your patience when we had a technical glitch. Sometimes when I discuss Sarvamnaya, people get carried away. How can you focus on so many different images? Our meditation, our spiritual practice is supposed to be focused on one Ishta Devata, and that is the case. If you read the Devi Mahatmya, you will see when the demon is a surprise, there are so many goddesses fighting, and then Shumba being alone, and he says, this is not even fair, you are so many and I'm alone. And the goddess says, Ekaivaham jagatyatra ditiya ka mama para pasyaita dushta mayeva vishantyo mad vibhutaya. So I am one and I can be many. So there is nothing that my plurality or singularity is to be confused about. So when I'm sharing some of these images, Jeffrey, you can quickly go through all of them because these are just for giving you an idea. This is the, we call Siddhi Lakshmi or Siddha Lakshmi. And that's for the public name. Pratyangira, more for the practitioners. Actually, you can move to the other deities and just more complexity here. First, I'll just go through the slides quick. And now we have the Guyeshwari in different manifestations, different iconographies. And this is just yet another that should not belong to the museum. This piece should have a shrine of its own now, I think in Berlin. So I hope all of you will have that awareness of how our living deities should not be kept in jail. And this is Kamakala Kali, one of the highest forms of Guya Kali. And it's like culminates as if in the form of Kamakala. Do I have more slides, or this is okay? I can just stay. We can stay on her form. This is her Vishwarupa, universal form. So what is this idea of Kali within Sarvamnaya? Because we can look through the perspective of Tripurasundari, we can look through the perspective of Kubjika, and it is not that one is higher than the other, because all these deity manifestations are the very revelations, expressions of the absolute in the Vimarsha, reflexivity. And only focusing on Kali, I won't have a lot of time today, so within the limited time, I'll just share with you 2-3 points only. That number one, even the 5 aspects of Sarvamnaya are integrated within the pentadic structure of Kali. And so we have at the core of Kali a 5 triangles, a pentadic structure to demonstrate her 5-fold manifestations. So the orientation towards creation, sustenance, dissolution, anakhya, the nameless state, and bhasa, the revelation, all these 5-fold aspects are expressed or described in terms of Kali. This philosophy of Kali goes way back. You have to read early Mahartha, Mahanaya, and Krama texts. And particularly if you are familiar with Abhinava Gupta's work, Sri Tantra Aloka in particular, you will find more of a commentary upon Kramakeli, the earlier Shakta texts, or Chid Gagana Chandrika, more of an extensive commentary text upon the same. What is the essence? How does this fit within Sarvamnaya? The idea is that the absolute pure consciousness is effulgent, vibrant, always pulsating, and our myriads of manifestations, our being in this world, the very expression of the world, my being embodied, my present right now, my presence, my speaking with you, all are the very expressions of Kali, and they are real. They are as real as anything can be. Some things will have a dimmer or fainter light, and others brighter light, but as far as the light is concerned, light in itself is real. The same way, consciousness itself, sometimes we have a focused consciousness, other times we have a dim, not so vivid consciousness. But as far as consciousness itself is concerned, that is still true and self-revealing in itself. The same way, we have these varied forms of Kali expressed. First, we start from relying on the triad, the Trika, if you read this, even Malini Vijayattara, you will start seeing the integration of the fourth, the Kali within, particularly if you read Abhinavagupta, and in particular chapter 29, and beyond, you'll see how the Krama is integrated with Trika Mandala and the Kali Krama Mandala. Now, as it comes to Sarvamnaya in particular, many people, because these traditions have been kept very secret, many people assume that somewhat after the exile of the Pandits from Kashmir, maybe these traditions have vanished to exist, and I do not blame them for their ignorance. Because these traditions are very much vibrant, particularly when the Trika is integrated within Sarvamnaya, and in particular the Kali tradition, where the Krama system is alive as it is. And you can see even in the existing manuals, the Krama that refers to 12 Kalis and 16 varied Kalis, and there are many, many more forms of Kali integrated within Guhyeshwari or Guhya Kali for the public, that is the Guhya Kali, and for all the priests inside. She's Mahachanda Yogeshwari, and you know that the Siddha Yogeshwari Mata and Chanda Yogeshwari, these are basically the same deities, and within the Chanda form, the ferocious form, she assumes the form of Kali, and she will still have the most benevolent, peaceful form in the nirvana states of ultimate initiation. So we will find another time to discuss in depth, but I will just give you one more link to integrate this with Trika, that if you read Spanda Karika, for example, even the initial commentary of Tam Shakti Chakra Vibhava Prabhavam, when it comes, you can read Kshemaraja's commentary, in which these fivefold structures of energies expressed in terms of Vyoma Vameshwari, Khechari, Dikshari, Gochari, Bhuchari, when you have these different realms of the deities explained there, these are in rituals too. Some people think that by reading some philosophical commentaries, they have somewhat a deeper knowledge or appreciation of the tradition, and they either ignore or look down upon paddhatis, the manuals, the actual rituals, when these practices are brought to life, and when these sadhakas, the practitioners, are visualizing for decades to bring these ideas to real experiences. And you can see even in the Kubjika text, you will see the wheels, the fantastic wheels within which these bhucharis and kecharis are discussed. So the coming to, we can share some questions, but the last point I'd like to make is some people then are too much oriented on rituals and recitation, and then they are relaxed in terms of reading shastras or philosophy, because they have this idea, fantasy, that just repeating mantras is just good enough. But that is again a very misguided understanding. In Sarvamnaya, we do integrate all darshanas as well, not just the mantras or the deities, and therefore it is mandatory for the students to equally pay attention to refining the mind by studying philosophy. And all these states relate to some experiences for which we need to have a greater state of the mind, and for that we need to have a philosophical understanding as well. I'll stop there, and if time allows, I'm open to questions. Jeffrey, you are in.
Yes. The message is we have about 2 minutes left. So we're a little tight on what we had originally planned. We were gonna talk a bit about this idea of the outsider-insider integration and the relationship to consciousness. I think I would just add that for me personally, as a Westerner coming to Nepal in 1996, pursuing dissertation research, meeting Sthaneshwar, and encountering such an extraordinary living tradition where you have a complete cultural system with a very deep history connected to a network of teachers and practitioners like Sthaneshwar himself. It's an extraordinary opportunity to take a deep dive into one's own soul, grounded in an extraordinarily rich cultural tradition. And Sthaneshwar, maybe you could speak for a second about the value of keeping such a tradition alive and how we might do that.
Thank you. I'll just take 1 minute, not more than that. I promise you, the organizers. So times have changed. I think to some extent we need to modify accordingly, not changing the content, but the way we are presenting these things. And for that, we need to have a bit more openness to teach these things. And I myself have started Vimarsha Foundation in order to keep this and many other similar traditions alive. Many friends encouraged me actually to even commission a statue of Guhyakali, and hopefully she will come to America. Because I, as a scholar, do not think that my job is done by just teaching some books. We have a moral obligation to keep these traditions alive. Thank you so much. Move on to next. I'm okay with it. I can keep talking for 2 hours, but.
Is Miroj here? Deepak ji. Sorry.
Now is Deepak Shimkhada here any longer? Deepak is here, but why is he not talking?
All right. Okay, I was muted. I'm sorry. All right. There is a question from one of the listeners addressed to Acharya Ji. That means Sthaneshwar Ji. Okay. There is a lion-headed goddess, also known as Pratangira, popular in South India. Is she related in any way to the goddess Pratangira you mentioned in your lecture? Would you care to answer that question?
Absolutely. We should not be confused with the manifest form alone. Whatever the mantras, we can start finding, at least from the Agama, like in Raurava Agama for the Pratangira. And we'll find many more forms of Pratangira, varied forms. Even within Siddhilakshmi, there are 8 varied benign forms of the goddesses come with the name Siddhilakshmi, and 8 other goddesses like Vishwalakshmi, making 16 Lakshmis. They all are from the same or varied emanations of the goddess Pratangira. And Many of these mantras are integrated. This is a process called samashti. Many of these mantras are integrated within the form of Guyeshwari. So every time we step up, we do not leave behind what is below. So there is not a real below or above in terms of deities, but it's just like the mantras become more and more complex. First, if we have just simple sentences having reference, we go to bija mantras, the seed mantras, where we have combined phonemes. And then we go further into kuta when we have multiple 6, 7, 8, 14 phonemes combined, and so on. Then we can go to ayuta, 10,000 kuta level, and for which we need to have a really long practice of meditation to master. But yes, these practices were meticulously organized and are part of the system. Nothing is left behind, and all the agamas are kept alive. Thank you.
Okay, who is the timekeeper and how much time we have for question and answer from the audience?
Let's keep our own time because we love Kali. So I'm just joking.
Kali makes her own time, right?
Yeah.
So
We are not subjected to time.
So Deepak ji, is Professor Shakya here? Because I think technically it's his time,
Okay,
but I don't see him.
let me find out. I do not see his name here on the participants. Okay, let me check my phone. Okay. While you are talking, let me talk to him.
Let's just somebody ask question when there's phone call going on. I'm energized.
Can you guys hear me in person?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm one of the students in the Masters of Yoga Studies program here at LMU. And I just wanted to say thank you for making the association of the goddesses and the chakras. I've never heard that before, so I appreciate that very much. And is there a document or someplace where I can read more about the goddesses and the chakra associations?
I have a couple of publications Sthaneshwar does as well. On our academia sites, if you go to academia.edu and you look by our names, you will find our list of publications. I have a book called The Goddess Within and Beyond the Three Cities, where I detail this. And Sthaneshwar, do you want to speak about which publications you would recommend?
Personally, I have not written on these, but if you scan through Chicago Museum of Arts, you might find some mandalas with the different Amraya deities in different chakras. That might be of your interest too. And these mandalas were not like modern day random tourist productions. These are like some 16th century, 17th century mandalas commissioned by the kings who were the foremost tantric practitioners. And some of the kings have even composed, like Pratapa Malla or Rana Bahadura Shaha. The Nepalese kings have actually composed text on Tantra. So they were the same people who also commissioned for these mandalas.
That's wonderful. I live in Chicago, so I'll definitely look for that. Thank you.
Sthaneshwar, there is a question by a Varun Bhaskar asking, historically, how has the Tantras and Agamas, how were they practiced before the emergence of the Trika system?
This is a very difficult question to say when did actually Trika system emerge. But as far as I can glean, I'm not a historian. I've tried to kind of refrain making historical claims. But as far as I know, we have to go to this original Yoginikula. That is the original Tantra. Go, if you want to dig deeper than the original Yogini Kula, I have no idea where to go to. And then maybe these 7 matrikas are the primary for the Tantra practice. Therefore, like you will still have the matrikas surrounding, and there are different numbers, like 16 matrikas, you know, the numbers is not important. So the structure of matrikas. But anyway, in all accounts, these 4 pithas, Kamarupa, Purnagiri, Jalandhara, and Udyana, these 4 pithas are real schools of the origination of tantric teachings, revelation of tantras. And all the texts we have today already suggest that they were aware of all the pithas, basically meaning the existing texts are already an integration of Sarvamnaya. By Sarvamnaya, I mean Kapuja, Kamarupa, Purnagiri, Jalandhara, and Udyana. These are the Amnayas, where the texts were revealed by the gurus in Kaku Mema, Khagendranatha, Kurmanatha, Meshanatha, Matsendranatha, Kapujao, Kaku Mema. Anytime a tantric text mentions that, it is a Sarvamnaya. When did the Trika start? It didn't start with Abhinava Gupta for sure. You know, so we have to go much deeper than that, and then we'll have to eventually go to Yogini Kula. So the independent yoginis and all the existing texts are not going to necessarily reflect that originality. But still, if you want to find the remnants of that, Jayadratha Yamala, Brahma Yamala, these are the texts that will give you deep insights to those practices.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, come on, someone come with question. That's easier than coming with answers.
Let's do some practice.
I am not going to do that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm in the yoga studies program as well, and I'm kind of taking on a perennial approach to a lot of these studies, and I've seen a lot of different, perennial comparisons to different cultures, and I was just wondering what you thought of the idea of that, and if you think it's offensive, ridiculous, or helpful. So particularly with the ancient Egyptian goddess Sekhmet being compared to or having a possible connection to the tiger version of Kali.
Jeffrey, that is you. You are the perennial guru.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I just got wrapped up in trying to find Miroj Shakya. I was a little distracted. Can you please repeat your question?
Basically, you see some people today, whether they're scholars or not, comparing Sekhmet to the ancient Egyptian goddess Sekhmet to Kali. I was wondering if you could speak at all on that. And if that is ridiculous, offensive, or helpful at all.
Okay, well, I cannot speak to it as an ancient Egyptologist. So, but I will just say that I can, generally, I don't find that offensive. I think it's a broad-minded, perennialist, mystical interpretation that's assuming the idea of a singular goddess manifesting itself in multiple cultural regions. I think there's something to that general thesis. And when you compare goddesses across traditions, like ancient South American goddesses, North American goddesses, Asian goddesses, there do seem to be recurring themes, although the themes are, of course, expressed according to the specifics of each linguistic and cultural tradition. So in that kind of broader perspective, if we're looking at the goddess from a perennialist mystical perspective, I'm always open to that kind of analysis, but I can't speak to the specifics because I don't do ancient Egypt.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, Sthaneshwar, I have a question, if I may.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, Professor
Okay,
Kak.
the question is, yes. So the question is, I work on neuroscience and consciousness and all that, and there is a lot of energy right now being invested in different academic disciplines to look at how to scientifically approach the phenomenon of consciousness. And to me, it appears as someone who knows a little bit about Kashmir Shaivism and their tradition, has the time come for a proper interaction or interface between these academic communities? Because people in consciousness science community are sort of lost. There are some people who are talking of algorithmic information, this and that, without any proper foundation. Is it the time now for somehow to make it easier for researchers or practitioners, because a lot of these researchers are also practitioners in their private sphere? In fact, I can tell you a little story if I get a minute. 5-6 years ago, DARPA in the US put together a series of week-long conferences to which they invited neuroscientists and computer scientists, and I was one of them too, and philosophers and quantum mechanics people. And we had a poll in Cambridge at one of those meetings. And the poll was, will computers of the future, not 10 years, 50 years, maybe 500 years, become conscious also? And about 50% said yes, and other 50% said no. As somebody who comes from the Vedanta or Kashmir Shaivism tradition, I was one of those 50% who said no. But the 50% who said yes, and they were all Americans and Europeans, I was the only Indian. Privately, they told me that they were into Buddhism. There were 50% who were into Vedanta and quantum mechanics, and 50% who were into Buddhism, the Shunyata form of Buddhism, because Buddhism has so many different lines as well. So the question then, to come back to it, is there a possibility of a dialogue between researchers of different kind who do consciousness studies from a more formal modern science perspective and the great river of Shaivism or Vedanta? And if yes, if the time has come, how might that be done?
I will try to be very brief.
May I interrupt? First of all, nice to see you, Professor Kak, Dr. Kak. Oh, what a wonderful topic to interject. Now our next speaker, Professor Shakya, is here. To be fair for his time, we are running out of time. So there's another panel right next to it. So this is a wonderful topic, and then it's we could spend hours, right, discussing about such a juicy, such a wonderful, deeply involved discussion. So we may not have time to answer the question. So perhaps we should go to ask Professor Miroj Shakya, who is here, had a lot of trouble logging into it. So let me introduce to Dr. Miroj Shakya, who is an associate professor at the University of the West, and he primarily teaches Buddhism there. So, and I don't even have a topic. I think you're talking about Vasudhārā topic. All right. Anyway, you just go ahead and introduce your topic, and then you start talking because we're just running out of time. It's already 9:12. So we have until about 9:30, 9:28.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Deepak, for organizing this panel. So today's my topic is overcoming poverty, the cult of Vasudhārā. Let me make it bigger. Cult of Vasudhārā in Nepal. Vasudhārā means the bearer of the wealth and the stream of treasure, or simply the earth. She is the one of the most popular female deities in Mahayana Buddhism. According to the Ladit Sutra, the earth goddess Prithvi Devata appears for the first time as the witness to the Buddha's personal experience of enlightenment when the Mara tried to disturb his meditation. And it is believed that the earth goddess is connected to Vasudhārā. And Vasudhārā is also seen as a consort of Jambala, the Buddhist deity of wealth. And Vasudhārā belongs to the Ratna Sambhava family, according to the 5 Buddhist system. But she is close comparable to the Hindu goddess Lakshmi. In both are the giver of the wealth, good fortune, and food. According to Sambhava Purana, Manjushri, the Bodhisattva visited Kalahirde at the Kathmandu Valley to pay homage to the Swayambhu Jyotirupa, along with his consort Kesani and Upakesani, also known as Barada and Mokshata. So these 2 consorts stayed at the Tenso and Fulso mountain. The one who stayed in the Tenso is identified as a Vidya Devi Saraswati, and one who's remained in Fulso is identified as a Vasudhārā or Lakshmi. According to Sarnamala, so she has one face and is 2-armed and holding the bunch of corn on the vessel, showering the varieties of gem in left hand and displaying the Bharat Mudra, the gesture of conferring boon. But in Nepal, another iconographic description, she's in yellow in complexion, seated in Lalit Asan's posture. She's depicted in the form having 1 face and 6 arms, displaying a rosary, jewel, and Bharat Mudra in her right hand, and the scriptural bundle of rice and vase of plenty in her left. So this is the most popular iconography in Nepal. And she blessed with the wealth, prosper anyone who sincerely chant her mantra, dharani, and perform the ritual invoking her. There are many Sanskrit texts related to the Vasudhārā, and among them, the Vasudhārā Bhartikatha, Vasudhārā Nama Sutra, and Vasudhārā Dharani, Suchandra Avadana, and Vasudhārā Uddesa, Sri Vasudhārā Sadhana, so on. So I'm going to focus on Vasudhārā Dharani because this is one of the main texts. So Vasudhārā Dharani, the content of the Vasudhārā Dharani is in the beginning part of the, it's give a description of the assembly, and the Sakya Buddha himself, who dwelled in the great forest of Kantaka near Kosambi, and there was 500 monks and a large number of bodhisattvas in that assembly. And there's the lay person named Suchandra who requested the Buddha to preach the Dhamma. And who was the Suchandra? So this Vasudhārā Dharani only give few information, but in the Suchandra Avadana give a little bit more detail about this Suchandra. So he was a householder who lived in Kosambi, was very poor. He used to be very rich, but because of the his son who committed some non-virtuous action, because of that they became poor, and was a man of tranquil mind, a great devotion, had many sons and daughters, had to support large number of relatives and servants. And he put forward the question like, "Oh Lord, does the son or daughter of the good family become rich again once he has become poor? How is he restored health and having sick?" So, and then Buddha gave answer to his question, and he told about this Dharani. So he said, "I heard this Dharani from another Buddha, Vajradhara Sagara Nirgosa, and he learned and mastered it and have explained it to others. Now he will teach this Dharani to Suchandra." And he suggested that if you memorize the Dharani, write it down in the book and you listen, so you will get benefit and you will have all kinds of wealth and also recover from the health. So then Buddha uttered the Dharani, a long Dharani. You can, if you don't want to read the whole thing, just recite Om Vasudhārā Swaha. So that's the mantra of the Vasudhārā. And then, so during that recitation, he suggested that one who after recitation, you also need to make a. So he gave a little bit instruction on how to worship the Vasudhārā. So Buddha asked Sundara to do a few things here. So he said one should recite the mantra for 6 months after worshiping all the Tathagata, and that the place where this charm or powerful charm is read becomes sacred, and arrange a mandala in the suitable place, such as your own house, and clean place, and use sandalwood for the Tathagata, and Lord Avalokiteshvara and all Buddha and Bodhisattva and sacred mantra devata. So one who practice or properly appropriate shape, his house will be full with all kinds of wealth and gold, and all his obstructions are removed. And the ending of this Dharani, the Ananda asks, like, what is the name of this discourse? And Buddha gave like this Dharani can be called Sutandra Grahapati Paripacha, the question of the Sutandra and householder and Vasudhārā Dharani Kalpa Sutra. And so this Dharani in Nepal, very popular, the collection of a Dharani called Saptabhyara Dharani. Vasudhārā belongs to the family of Saptabhyara, and especially here in the list I gave here, Vasudhārā is worshipped on the Sunday. And then the main purpose of worshiping Vasudhārā is for wealth. And same thing, in second day, you can worship the Vajra Vidyarini for health, and Ganapati for granting all the wishes, Usnesa Vijay for protection from contagion and granting a long life, Parnaswari for the protection from evil power and accident, Marichi for self-preservation, Grahamatrika for long life of 99 years, memory for prior lives, protection from the evil influence of the planet. And there's a few other stories we can find in the different Vasudhāra's philanthropic activity. In Vasudhārā Bhattakatha, Bimlavati Abhidhana, the story of the Dhanasarva. So all this story give us the same thing, like Vasudhārā rescue many people and help to gain the wealth. So I will not go to that detail because of limited time. And the life cycle rites associated with Vasudhārā. So in Nepal, there's a rite called old age rite, Jatha Jongko or Jajangko rite. So there's three. One is Bhimaratharohana. So during that first rite, people worship Gharmatika, and second rite called Maharatharohana. So people who turn 88 years old, 8 months and 8 days, they practice the they celebrate the Maharatharohana, and they specifically worship Vasudhārā on that occasion. And the third one is Devaratharohana, Usnesa. So you can see in this Chaitya, the third, and the second one is the Vasudhārā in this one. The first one, Grahamatrika, Vasudhārā, and Usnesa here. Sacred shrine of the Vasudhārā. So there, the Vasudhārā is situated in each of the 4 cardinal directions, different cardinal direction of Nepal Mandala, and the Vajrayogini temple in the east. There's a Vasudhārā there. And Vasupura of Swambhu in the west. So Vasupura is the southwest of the Swambhu Chaitya, and Acharya Santikara consecrated the Vasupura along with the Santipura, Nagpura, Vayupura, Agnipura, representing 5 cosmic elements, Pancham Mahavut. So he installed a vase of plenty, Purna Kalasa, for the propitiation of the deity Vasudhārā, along with the golden banner to protect Swambhu from various catastrophic like earthquake caused by the defect of the earth element. And Fulchok Mai in the south. So Vishnu Buddha in the past once visited the Kathmandu Valley, and to pay homage to Swambhu, he climbed the mountain peak to the south of the Nagahirde Lake and offered 125,000 jasmine flowers to the Lord Swambhu. And after that, the place is known as a Fulcho. So he predicted that at one time in the future, the water of this lake would dry out, and then there would arise many sacrifices of the passionless one, Vaitaraga. At the bottom of the Mount Fulchok, Mother Vasudhārā will arise and create a spring of pure water, and those who make prayer and wish for water will get plenty of water. So after making this prediction of the disciple concerning the emptying of the lake water, Vasudhārā returned to his abode. So this is very powerful sacred place, and every 12 years, I think the Godavari, they have a celebration. You can see there's a lake, the water coming from this shrine. And next is the Vasudhārā shrine in Maharajganj in the north. And this shrine, we believe that the first king of the Nepal has established this. Dharmakara, the king, established it. We believe that. And there's few beautiful Vasudhārā shrine in Harinabana Mahabhayar Kwabha in Kathmandu. And the next one is Vasudhārā at the Rudnabana Mahabhayar. And before I mentioned that, most of the popular iconography of the Vasudhārā is the 6 arm. And this one is Madhipur Themi Bhaktapur. And then festival associated with Vasudhārā. So newer Buddhist commemorate Vasudhārā in various events and festivals throughout the year. And there are many Vasudhārā image shrine placed in many Baha Bihara of the Kathmandu Valley to worship her. And many group has been placed in different parts of the village, cities, and Kathmandu Valley, such as Maharajganj, Bungamati, Badgaon, to organize the various activity to worship Vasudhārā. And Vasudhārā Berta in Newari is Gatila Talandanimu. One of the popular events dedicated to worship of Vasudhārā fall on the full moon of the harvest during the lunar month of Bhadra, in English, August, September. It is performed in 2 consecutive days, and it is also known as Gatila or Tila Berta. So it is believed that one who performs this Berta will get 7 kinds of gift: wealth, qualities, offspring, longevity, happiness, praise, and wisdom. So in observance of the Vasudhārā Berta, one observe 8 precepts and refrain from 10 non-versus karma. And one should take a bathe in a river and put the clean cloth, and then fill a pitcher with pure water. And the mantra of the Vasudhārā should be repeated. So this worship goes on the whole day. So this one in the Swambhu, there's a Vasupura here nearby. So every year in the Bhadra, they perform this birth. And during this birth, there's a Vasudhārā procession take place in different part of Kathmandu, and they offer the devotee make various kinds of offering to the Vasudhārā, such as fruits, sweets, grain, and so on. And Vasudhārā in the Samyak festival. So during the Samyak festival, which takes place in 4 or 5 years, Vasudhārā from Tangaba and variety of deities are brought to the Nagabala, and together with a life-size cast statue of the Kungar Buddha image. And Vasudhārā, one of the people worship first. And beside other, so there's a Yomari Puni where people worship the Dhanalakshmi, which is another name of the Vasudhārā. And they make this rice cake. And during the Swanti, festival of Swanti, Swanti is very popular in India, it's Dasahara, and in Nepal we call Tihar. So during that period, the Buddhists, especially Buddhists, they worship this Sodasi Lakshmi, which is another form or name of the Vasudhārā instead of Lakshmi. Due to time limit, I will try to conclude. The conclusion: Vasudhārā is one of the prominent goddess of the Nepal Newar Buddhist pantheon, and Newar have been revering Vasudhārā in Nepal. The worship of Vasudhārā in Kathmandu Valley is still being practiced, and we can feel her presence in the day-to-day life of the Newar Buddhist community. As a bestower of the wealth and prosperity, the Newar Buddhists have been reciting this Vasudhārā Dharani to ensure that everyone will remain in prosperity and happiness. Such a recitation and worship of Vasudhārā have been keeping the living heritage of Kathmandu Valley alive, and we must ensure that the chanting of Vasudhārā Dharani must continue so as to support the Newar Buddhist tradition and make its culture alive. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Shakya. Now, I think we have about just a minute or so. If there is any quick question. 9:35, there is a panel that we all have to know. So any questions for Dr. Shakya?
Could I ask a question?
No, please, Dr. Kar.
Okay, my question is, does Nilakanta Dharani also get recited in the community? Because Nilakanta Dharani is where there is this interface between worship of Shiva and Buddhist worship. And it's a very popular Dharani in China and Japan and Vietnam.
Yes. So Nilakanta, we also call Mahakarunika Dharani. It has two different names. So we also recite that. Very popular in Newar community, also in China, everywhere. And in Chinese, they call Tapetso. It's very popular.
Okay.
Yeah, we share same. It has lots of Hindu names in that something. Thank you.
Dr. Cox's expertise would be very, very helpful. And of course, we didn't have enough time to engage in that question and conversation. Maybe if you could stay on for another hour or so. Another panel, I'm talking about goddess and the Big Bang is a kind of a biggest stretch. Perhaps in a scientist like you, it would be very helpful to see through your eyes whether or not what I'm proposing make even little sense. So that would be my hope if you could attend that next session. All right, now I don't know how much time we have. Where is the timekeeper?
Here we should be start like 9:35, so we have 4 minutes left.
Okay. All right.
And I'll just announce, if anybody in the room wants coffee or tea, it's at the end of the hall. And I know 4 of us here are speaking. So if you need to rejuvenate, now's a good time to do it.
Deepak, can I say a couple words?
Yes, please.
First of all, Dr. Vergeti, I just want to say namaste. I just saw you in that Zoom. It's an honor to have you here. Also, Dr. Kok, I hope you saw Dr. Timilsina's request that you post your question to the Vimarsha group so that it can be discussed further.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
That was wonderful, Professor Lidke. And of course, I have read a lot of works of Anne Barghati, and Dr. Paul keeps referring me to read your book. So I have done some of that. And of course, Kiran Bhatt is here, and our leader, Chris Chapple, is just running around, being a organizer. That's his role. And of course, good to have Dr. Kok, and Nalini Rao is here, my colleague, and who else that I can recognize going down the list. Okay, let's see. There are a lot of people whom I need to meet, and of course, my old friend Adam Pavey is here. Thank you for joining, Adam. Okay, let's see. A lot of them are new faces. It shows that I'm an old timer. All right. Okay, it's good to have you all. Thank you for joining. This is our first attempt on a remote conference Zoom, and even though we had used last year, so this is actually broadening our horizon. We had only within the United States, but now we have some participants from South Asia. I know in the evening some of the folks from South Asia, and even yesterday we had Asma participating from Pakistan, and also one guy from Nepal. And in this morning's presentation, one of the participants is from Nepal, so he will be participating from there. So it is broadening, and I'm very happy that it is going global. All right. Okay. Thank you.
I would like to thank Deepak for his patience, Jeff and Miroj and Sthaneshwar, and our apologies for the glitchiness. I think that people became hypersensitive in the big universe about security, and consequently, we got derailed in 2 of our sessions. 2 proceeded with full time. I apologize, and we will be proceeding now with the next. And if you want to stay in this space, we will continue conversations about the goddess vis-a-vis Padmavati. And the Padmavati story is to be shared by 5 scholars, beginning with a professor to be, who is a postdoctoral holder at Claremont School of Theology, completing her PhD with Vasudhārā, former president of the American Academy of Religion at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And Venu Mehta has joined our weekly Sanskrit reading group, and we're currently reading a Jain text by Yashivajaya. And I invite Venu to take this place. I'm going to lighten the room a little bit so that you will be able to see her a little bit better than you can see me. And she also will, as most of us, have some material that will be shared.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Chapple. And this is the first in-person conference after this 2 years of COVID lockdown. It looks like we are breaking the fast, meeting in person. And as we say in Gujarati Jain tradition, it's like parna, like breaking the fast after so many years, like so many years of fasting of something. That looks good. Okay, thank you. And then I share.
Yeah, you already share.
It was already being shared. Okay, great. All right, okay. So this panel is on Jaina goddess Padmavati. And my presentation is a part of my ongoing PhD dissertation. And I am talking about one sort of argument from my project. So in this presentation, I highlight the significance and role of vernacular Jain literature in Gujarati language as an instrument and platform for constructing a mediated identity of Padmavati, a female form of divinity in the Jain tradition. While this paper is specifically an examination of Jain vernacular literature and thus contributes to the discussion in the field of Jain studies.
We need to screen share.
Oh, okay. All right, okay, I'll do that. It's automatically share. Okay. I hope you can see that. Thank you. So I was talking about this. This discussion specifically contributes to the Jain studies, but it co-currently contributes to the more extensive
Put it on presentation.
Discussion about the historical process of vernacular literary development and traditions in South Asia and mechanism by which religious devotional texts work to construct an identity towards achieving a goal of resolving theological paradox, which is one of my arguments in the dissertation that I'm working on. The paper focuses on the vernacular literature dedicated to Padmavati and written between 18th century to contemporary time by Shwetambar Murti Pujak, that is temple dweller Jains in Gujarati language, specifically in the part of Gujarat. Padmavati is the Yakshi or the female attendant deity of the 23rd Tirthankara Parshvanath. As a Sashan Devta or guardian deity, Padmavati is believed to help protect the teachings of her Jina Parshvanath. In the cosmos as visualized by the Jains, the Jaina goddess Padmavati is an unliberated soul. Unlike Tirthankara, the fully liberated souls and unlimited and ultimate ascetics who exemplify the path to liberation. Given this role, the Tirthankaras emerge as the only true object of worship and devotion in Jain theology. While the vernacular literature explicitly portrays Padmavati as an object of worship, such a portrayal presents a paradox in the sense that while not being one of the Tirthankaras or the ford maker, the Jina, the principal object of worship, she is still accorded extraordinary veneration, specifically in Gujarat among the Shwetambar Murti Pujak Jains. I argue that the vernacular literature construct a unique regional identity of Padmavati that subsequently demonstrate two developments that I'm focusing on for this paper, among several others for my dissertation. First, it helps resolve the paradox and serves a platform to negotiate between Padmavati's identity as a Yakshi and as an independent goddess. Today, I will discuss the ways in which the vernacular literature constructs first a unique regional identity of Padmavati, second, portraying her as a mother goddess, third, engages that identity to establish the centrality of Padmavati in the religious life of the worshippers in Gujarat, and by resolving the paradox that I discussed earlier, the theological paradox, that who is the object of worship. From her association with Parshvanath, as you can see on the screen, and her consort Dharendra, which is in maybe here, the Yakshi Padmavati is easily recognizable by the serpent hoods over her head. Most primary material on Padmavati are largely written in Sanskrit during the medieval to post-medieval period. While a few exceptions, the secondary material on Jaina goddesses has been written by an art historian and has been concerned with historical issues of iconography. However, scholarly writing on Padmavati's Tantric tradition are inadequate. And I avoid the word cult specifically, and I call it tradition. Hardly any attention is paid to the scholarly exploration of vernacular literature dedicated to Padmavati. There are a couple of interesting studies on Jain stavans and bhakti literature, but not for any goddess and not for Padmavati. With this reference, by focusing on material produced in Gujarati language, I aim to fill the gap in the scholarship on the major development of Padmavati's popularity, resulting from and characterized by both intellectual discourse and vernacular literary tradition, literary culture. Again, in this presentation, I aim to demonstrate how the authors and the readers, that is devotees, use vernacular literature for exercising their agency in constructing the necessary identity of a female deity in the Jain pantheon. I analyzed the corpus of literature on Padmavati collected from various Bhandaras during my visit to Gujarat. Bhandaras are the Jain repository or library. The literature consists of liturgical, instructional material, books and volumes, usually known as granthas, written to introduce and praise Padmavati, devotional songs. I identify the corpus of literature as Praja Sahitya, people's literature, a term defined by Mohanlal Dalichand Desai, MD Desai, a specific genre that flourished among the Jain poets who began to compose ritual literature, devotional songs, lyrical ballads during the post-17th century in Gujarat. I'm inspired by the close reading technique from literary studies, but the analysis is grounded in authors' use of Gujarati language, literary style, motifs, and Gujarati cultural elements to portray the identity of Padmavati at the same time resolving the theological issues. So now I won't read anything, but I'll just present the analysis of the text. I have not translated all the texts yet, all the songs yet. I'm still doing that, but I'll do a couple of them. So, for example, if you look at the folk song genre, then so this is very much a very Gujarati. So the rag of this song is a very much Gujarati folk song called Garba, and what. So apart from the literary analysis and literary cultural elements that has been added to write the songs to Padmavati, the most important part is to look at the words, the language they are using. So for example, it says like Padmavani chundari chamke che jamak jhol, and soneri palavdo sone gule ruperi kinare nahi thai koi mol. So Padmavati is adorned with red color silken garment, which is very Gujarati one, and her chundari is shining. So she is given chundari instead of any other like very classical depiction of Padmavati. And then comes the word called, lines comes, the chundari flies softly in the all four directions. And I analyze that this is something what, the Chaumukhi Pratimas of Jinas. That the message of the Jina or the Jina Shashan of the Jina spreads all the sides. And they are adding this element and value of the Jina to the Padmavati. When they're saying that your silken garment, when you are flying in the four directions. So this is kind of a way to, resolve the paradox that who is now object of worship. The second one is that, again, she is given a very Gujarati identity. What I found, so my dissertation is based on literary studies as well as iconographical studies and also field work and interviews. So the Jains that I have interviewed, both male and female of all age above 18, and worshippers, non-worshippers, devotees, non-devotees, all the groups. And for them, it's more important to have a goddess in their life, irrespective of being, Jain or non-Jain. It's a Gujarati characteristic to have a goddess. And this entire interviews and collection from their thoughts are kind of, helping me in analyzing the text now. I keep on decoding the language. So the ankles, the bangles, the words that are used are very typical Gujarati. And then comes that, that oh Madi is oh mother. And when I say like, this is simple, just a goddess, no, it's a mother goddess. So the mother goddess that does everything, that does more than sometimes a Jina. So that is again a kind of an analysis that I do that. It's again a resolving the paradox. And the next one. And I like the very last line, which I've highlighted in red and underlined, that most of the time it's like she is installed with Jina. It begins with several different stories. Specifically with Padmavati, the story she comes to Jina is a different one, but in usual installation process, she's installed after Jina to protect his Shashana. She comes to Samavasarana when the Jinas would deliver the first sermon. So this is a normal traditional theological understanding. And then they become happy to become the attendant of the Jina. But in this song, in this verse, it says that the Arhat is happy because you are being installed. So it's pretty much they are not divorcing with the Jina, but certainly they are changing the position. And this is again, they want her as mother goddess, who is like a creator, who is like kind of a very I don't want to do that like comparative study, like a very Hindu thing, but a mother is a mother and it's needed. And when I met Kathiawadi, because my focus is more on like Ahmedabadi Jains, so so that is again a different thing that they have like, you know, love for the Chamundas and Kalis and everywhere. If you meet Kathiawadi, and I come from Bhavnagar where we have Khodyar, and for them, Padmavati is just like a very domestically available goddess who is also, you know, omnipresent. So Arhati is very happy. This is again Ras Garba. This can be sung and this can be danced upon. And she keeps on, she is being called Madi and Mata, which is very, you know, Gujarati, very Gujarati, old Gujarati word. This is from the Nakoda Bhairav, Nakoda Parshvanath. And this I found from a very, you know, less visited temple, Derasar in Ahmedabad. It's called Bhattini Bari. And this image was worshipped by Veer Vijayji, which is again a kind of an entire independent chapter in my thesis, but I would like to avoid that for now. Okay, so the central aim of Jainism is to attain liberation. And it has been discussed by several scholars, senior scholars, which I always take support from, that Padmavati is just for well-being, it's for worldly affair. And she should not be, I mean, it's not that she can be connected with liberation, because, you know, if we know at all something of the very foundational principles and you know, understanding of Jainism, liberation is an individual independent duty. But still, you know, in Stavans, jinas are being addressed to and being even involved into the liberation process and all that. But here they are connecting liberation with Padmavati, the third level of resolving the theological issue here, that I attain liberation as I sing your song. I'm also going to analyze all the levels of theological resolution from all the bhakti things, for example, Shakya Bhakti and these Bhakti and that Bhakti, but that again is not a part of this presentation today. So when I sing your Garbo, that's Garbo is a very, you know, it's a folk song genre in Gujarati language. When I sing your name, I attain liberation. So now she becomes, you know, the object of veneration in the path of attaining liberation. And the entire song I haven't translated yet. It takes a lot of time because I do not want to, you know, lose the essence of it. Your Anushtan is, so for example, here a word called your Anushtan is very unique here. Then if I see you, if I do darshan, it will take away my pap. So on and so forth. But the final word is like I attain liberation. Again, in this one, for example, the one on the right side, again, it ends with that, you know, with you, because you are here, the arhats are happy. So it keeps on, the themes keeps on repeating. And on the left one, it says that, you know, with your Anushtan here, with your Pratishtha here, we are happy, this and that. So she becomes the central figure in the literature that I have. And then we have Duhas and Chandas, which is also, I personally like Duhas and Chandas a lot, because I have grown listening to them for any gods and goddesses in Gujarat. So, and these are very beautiful words for Padmavati. I'm not taking too much of time here, and I will allow question and answers. And then in some of the songs, she's, and it is also in, and we'll listen to other, you know, presentation with the Sanskrit language and Padmavati, in which we'll see that she's been depicted as Kali, all the goddesses, all the possible goddesses in the world. And then there are Duhas as well. She's Chandika, she's Gauri, she's everything. One unique point that I have noticed is that literature, devotional songs written on her is specifically inspired by Charani literature or Charani Sahitya from Gujarat, which is a very unique literary tradition, or rather literary tradition that has been helpful for to celebrate religious sentiments and emotions, particularly for the goddesses. And that is also one prominent observation that I have made, that why the authors are using Charani Sahitya style, Charani literature style to write on Padmavati. Charani Sahitya is specifically written for all the, you know, village goddesses or the folk deities. And that is the thing. and then aartis and all that. But so this is my basic presentation, and it's still on way, and I'm still working. So please, I invite questions and comments. I'll take one beautiful picture of Padmavati.
Can we ask questions, ma'am?
Yeah, please, why not?
Hello, I am Anirban Roy, and it was a very interesting talk. I'm actually from Bengal, but I've always been very interested in Gujarat and its culture. But and especially knowing about Goddess Padmavati, it's a very beautiful thing, because it's the first time I'm coming in contact with the cult of Goddess Padmavati. So thank you for presenting this to us. From the pictures of the iconographies and the paintings that you have shown in your presentation, ma'am, about Padmavati, or about the serpent with the serpent head on her head, and whatever her iconographies and manifestations, I would just want to make one point, if you can take that into consideration. That is, in Bengal also, we have a cult on Padmavati, which she is actually worshipped over here as Mansa, goddess Mansa. She is very much of the Hindu fold, but she's not at all of the Jain. But from the iconographies and the paintings, with the swan as one of her vahanas, and she's sitting on with the serpent, or sarpa chhatra on her head. So it's a very beautiful amalgamation of two cults, and from two different parts of India, and although from two different traditions, one from a Jain tradition and one from a, although it is very debatable that whether the cult of Manasa got integrated into the Hindu cult from a Buddhist tradition or a Jain tradition, but that we have to go into history for thousands of years back for that. But if you just can, if you can just show some light on this correlation, because from the pictures it's immensely similar to the cult of goddess Mansa in Bengal, which is very much widespread. We worship goddess, although she is a serpent goddess in Bengal, a folk goddess, very much worshipped in all the villages, and more importantly, she is very much worshipped in eastern Bengal, and her cult has also come from eastern Bengal, which is now Bangladesh. So if you can just throw some light on this, because it's a very interesting topic, and thank you, ma'am, for presenting this to us.
Yes, yeah, thank you for the question. And yes, so Professor Chapple mentioned that I'm a PhD student, and my supervisor is Dr. Narayanan. And this question, when comes to that, like, what's the origin of Padmavati's identity and how her identity is being shared among different other traditions, like also from Buddhist traditions, say that like Tara groups of goddesses come close to her, Harini, and so on and so forth. There are several stories. Her identity is so much that which of the Padmavati comes first is like who brought independence to India. So, and we are still debating on that. So because of Dr. Narayanan and our discussion, my discussion on that I am going to have an independent chapter on that, the shared identity of Padmavati among different traditions, a little bit of it. And Kelam is also here, so his work also helped me in that. But of course, Mansa is considered to be kind of a different version of Padmavati. So I have been reading, and I know a little bit on that what of the goddess comes first. But of course, she's identical with her Mansa, Tara, groups of goddesses, and even if we go to south, she has different other forms. And so I was even looking at the thing like the Padmavati, goddess with Vishnu is also whether she's the same or not, because names are very important. Even the iconography is very important. The names like Padmavati names keeps on repeating several times in history. But if you look at the iconography, but if you also look at the origin stories, so in some of the material that I was reading that says that like, Padmavati, the Harini, she was the daughter of Harihara. And there are so many different things. So I'll unfold something, but yeah, she is considered like, a kind of a counterpart or neighboring, goddess to Manasa. Yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was really quite invigorating and really wonderful to hear your research. And I think that this bodes well for an ongoing research project for all of us collectively. How am I looking out there? I can't see myself. Okay, now I can see where I am. That's good.
Yeah.
So can I just use yours here?
Yeah.
All right, good. So this study is a small study compared to what Venu just shared. And it arose out of a place. And the place is the Jain Mandir in Alipur in North Delhi, where I have been living about a decade during the summer for several weeks each year. And this particular Smarak is magnificent, 12 acres, has a community of Brahmins in the back that maintain the 5 temples that are located on the property. It also has a research library, a shelter for traveling monks and nuns, and a very prestigious K-12 school. Remarkably beautiful, created by folks that came during the years immediately following partition. Now, as I began to travel there, the Padmavati temple shrine was just starting up. And the very first year, it was utterly just plain carved marble. And then slowly the gold gilt started. And slowly, even though the pujas were done every day, the pujas themselves became increasingly complicated. And as I would sit in that temple every morning, transfixed by the murti, I found a sort of bliss setting in. I found an alteration of my field of vision that really sort of set me up to have a pretty good day. And I'm being a little bit confessional about this, but I was really moved by the presence of this image, and also quite taken with the rituals performed by the Brahmins every day. And they, of course, have to cleanse the entire shrine, to redress the image, and to chant out praise hymns to Padmavati. And this booklet showed up one day, and I decided, and I just read from it and decided that I would ask for it. And lo and behold, it was gifted to me. And I brought it back here to Los Angeles, and our study group, which meets weekly, reading Sanskrit texts, went through the 108 praise stanzas in her honor. Now, I want to visit the iconography here just briefly. You can see Padmavati to Parshvanat's left. You can see Dharnendra, her regal husband, to Parshvanat's right. And what's invoked here is a multivalent story of remembrance of their relationship. And they had both been rescued from a burning fire, kindled by Parshvanat's apotheosis. And Parshvanat took this yogi and said, wait a minute, stop your fire meditation, pulled some logs out of the ritual tapas generating fire, releasing Padmavati and Dharnendra. Later, when that particular yogi, Kamat, had ascended after his death to become the god of the monsoons, He had vowed that he would drown Parshvanat before Parshvanat could reach moksha. And the snakes in the ready formed that beautiful canopy over Parshvanat's head. So whenever you see a Parshvanat image, you're also gazing upon Dharnendra and particularly Padmavati, and with their bodies, they lifted him up out of the water that threatened his very life. Now, as we read these 108 verses, and Venu already has so encapsulated the delicious ambiguities about Padmavati, each line starts with Om, Krom, Hrim, Shri. Okay, this is Tantra, not only 101, but 1001. And then we find interspersed with very Hindu imagery and theology. Again and again, remembrances that she is devoted to the Dharma. There's invocations of the Namakar mantra, but threaded with this are reminders that when you have Padmavati, you also have Lakshmi, you also have Saraswati, you also have Durga and Kali. She is named the Yogini. And if we look at, even the history of Delhi, which was Yogini Pura, and the conflicts between the Jains and the Tantrikas throughout history, there's much to be said. It also says very delicately that she is the essence of spring, that she holds all in her hands, but it also aligns her without naming Parvati, but aligns her with Parvati and Kali. But Parvati, like the wife of Shiva, you radiate the color of the rising sun. You are profound, fascinating, and accomplished. Now, during this course of study a couple of years ago, we also read another 108 hymns in praise of Sri Lalita. And Sri Lalita, echoes of the panel earlier this morning, was honored by none other than Shankaracharya. And our colleagues here, the late Sunanda Shastri and Yajneshwar Shastri, spent many years compiling this commentary that similarly includes 108 praise verses of Sri Lalita. And as I read through those and compared them, what we see here is straight on Sankhya philosophy and praise of the goddess, but highly pedagogical. Whereas with the Padmavati shlokas, or not shlokas, but praise verses, stuti, that are contained here, it was more emotional. So I just wanted to revisit with Venu. There's so much comparative work to be done. And in closing, because we have so many people who have so much more to say than I do, I just thought that we could savor this image, backing up and being drawn into that place of equipoise, that place of meditative alacrity. So thank you. So we have time for one question, if anyone. Okay, so I will next introduce Caleb Simmons, and he's up next. And his title is The Goddess's Domain, Kingship and the Authority of the Jain Goddess Padmavati.
Good
Good morning, everyone here in attendance and online. We just set up. I brought a lot of things up to the lectern today. Oh, no, it's dropped.
Should I share now?
Yeah, you can go ahead and share. I can step back to it if that helps. I like to move around a lot. I'm used to lecturing in pretty large lecture halls all the time. So standing still makes me a little nervous. So today I will be obviously talking about the Jain goddess Padmavati. And I first have to say thanks to SASA for hosting the conference. And I'm really quite humbled to be in this panel in particular because there's so many giants within the field of religious studies, within goddess studies. So to be sort of sandwiched in the middle of professors Nandagopal, Zain Bose, and Chapple, and of course the emerging star Venu Mehta is quite an honor for me. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this group. So today I'm talking about something I keep returning to. My first book was on kingship, and when I sent in the manuscript, it was absolutely gigantic, and Oxford said absolutely not. Please cut it in half. And so the colonial part remained, and everything pre-modern went into I won't say the dustbin, but it's still waiting. But this talk actually relates back to some of my earlier work, and some of it that's been published. And some of that will be forthcoming in the journal Monsoon, hopefully. So I'm talking about kingship and authority related to the Jain goddess Padmavati, and we can advance to the next slide. And just for an overview where we're going today, I'm going to give a very brief, and I'm going to try to keep it simple and move forward, overview of goddesses and kings that might be helpful for some people who are newer to the subject. Then I'll briefly introduce a South Indian motif that I find in largely vernacular literature. When I say literature, I'm talking about palm leaf manuscripts, later printed manuscripts, Sthala Puranas, and inscriptions. And then I'll use as my example a Western Ganga inscription, and then sort of reflect more broadly on the concept of Padmavati and local kingship, and be able to reflect a little bit more broadly about some of the areas that I want to go with this research, and hopefully have continuing conversations over meals for those people here, and for people attending via the Zoom chat, email, or personal Zooms. If you have some insights, I would love them. I've also got my PowerPoint running down here, just for my reference. All right, okay, so we can go to the next slide. So in the Indian subcontinent, I will also have to say as a disclaimer, my research is in South Asian religions, but I typically focus on Hinduism and then intersections with Jainism and Islam where they come up. So a lot of my background for this is coming from what we now consider Hindu sources, but what I'll sort of gesture toward at the end is being a larger regional kingly aesthetic. So often goddesses are seen as sources of power and authority for kings. Of course, we go to the text Devi Mahatmyam. There's a classic story of Surata, the king who's devoted to the goddess, and through blood rituals at the end and his devotion eventually is elevated to the universal sovereign of a Manu in his next life. This ritual life is reinvigorated annually, especially from the medieval period. When I say medieval, it's a meaningless concept, and so you could say basically post-Gupta, and then forward as it evolves. In the ritual of Navratri or Navami or Dasara, Puja are the same, depending on where you're at. They all seem to have this relationship about power and kingly authority, in which the goddess and her Shakti is what invigorates the king and authorizes his power to rule on earth, as a corollary, an analogy, whatever term you want to use there. And so there's this ritual exchange in which devotion is exchanged for earthly authority, earthly sovereign power. And so here we have an image from a manuscript from the Boston Fine Arts Museum, in which the goddess is being formed by the Tejas of all of the gods. And this is a direct corollary to a verse in the Laws of Manu, in which the first earthly sovereign is formed. So there's always this analogy between earthly sovereignty and the goddess, and we can move forward. All right, so the South Indian motif, and this is something that I keep coming back to in all of my research, because it seems like no matter what inscriptions I find, maybe it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, but there is this concept of the goddess's local relationship to local kings. And so I'm not talking about when someone becomes an emperor over a large region. Often then devotion sort of shifts to either Shiva or Vishnu, depending on region and time period. But for the upstart smaller kings, we find a motif of migration, of people who are heroic, either a person, often brothers as it evolves. They go to a powerful site, and the power of the site is recognized by different sorts of miracles. You have anything from a typical one that I love in Kannada is like a bunny rabbit is chasing a tiger, as opposed to the opposite direction. And so people say, this is a powerful, weird place, what's going on? And they try to figure it out. Others, or people will take out swords and cut through solid stones. There's a lot of things that, sort of point out that this is a powerful site. And around that same miraculous moment, then there is a cult leader, you can call him religious professional, pujari, I think they're called a lot of things in the text, but it's someone who is a leader of a devotional tradition to a local goddess. And at this moment, there is a recognition of not just the powerful site, but as that person who's come through as someone who is chosen, elected. I would love to talk about election, because I think that's where my next project is going to go, just the concept of election. But they're chosen and said, not only is this place powerful, but you are powerful. You are being authorized as the goddess. There's a ritual exchange. A Abhisheka goes forward, and then this person who has just been passing through now becomes the new ruler. So you find this, there's hints of it as early as the 6th century, but fragmentary. By the 11th century, this is now a standard motif that you find in a lot of regional kingdoms, especially at their beginning, and then eventually they become cemented in much larger stela Puranas. And of course, the eminent professor Robert Zeidenbos knows all about the Stela Purana for Padmavati. So I look forward to picking his brain a lot this weekend. And we can go to the next slide. And so we find these primarily, the older versions, in inscriptions, whether they're stone inscriptions or copper plate inscriptions. These are documentary texts as well as genealogical texts. There's a lot that goes on in them. I won't get completely into everything, but they tell these stories within a broader purpose of installing usually a land grant in which there is tax revenues or taxes deferred for a religious institution or a prominent minister. And I have here an image of Jinadatta Shantara from the Hambuja Jain temple in Mehta. And this is actually for the monsoon journal. I'm going to be comparing this with the thing that I talk about today, but I need to still do a little bit more legwork. But the one thing that's important for my overall discussion is within these standard compositions, there's a mirrored political order in which the terms used for the deities are the same as the terms used for the rulers. And sometimes it becomes a sort of Slasha moment where you actually can't tell who they're talking about at the moment because they use terms like Nata. And so it could be referring to the earthly sovereign or the divine sovereign. And so I think this is very intentional. All right, next slide. I'm already so far behind. So here's the details of the inscription, and I'm just going to dive in because I wanted to read this part because I don't want to mess up any of the story. So this inscription, and we can go to the next slide, and we can come back to this if anybody wants it. It runs through a lot of the genealogies, starting though, and this is very important when we think about language, as Venu pointed out, that the language names are important. The inscriptions always start off in Sanskrit. If you take Jackson Pollock, Sheldon Pollock's theory of language and the Cosmopolis, you have this, it starts off with Sanskrit because it's open to a wider audience. We can, of course, debate that. But it starts off with an invocation of Jain's Syadavada doctrine, and talks about the Shasanas of the Nata, of the three worlds. And then next transitions to Kannada, and then we get down to sort of the real business of genealogy, which I've argued elsewhere is really where they're staking the claim to the eventual ruler, contemporaneous ruler, being able to give the land grants. You have to prove that there's authority there, and then giving the land grant itself. And for sake of time, I'm just going to go through this very quickly. And actually, I'll use this guide, and I'm just going to use this, and then I'll jump ahead. So basically, it recounts the genealogy of this particular ruler going back in time immemorial, tracing the lineage all the way back to the beginning of time, the beginning of sovereignty. And then there's this devotional relationship that always emerges. And the farther back you go, the rulers are tied to male deities. But then as you move forward and you get closer into the region that we're discussing, then all of a sudden you'll see there's a shift with Padmavati, when all of a sudden now it's a goddess. And so Shasana Devate becomes the object. And then we get down to Dadiga and Madhwa, and hopefully I can find my spot, and we will start there with me actually reading. Okay. So it's right here. So again, the narrative jumps forward, but this time to the period of Parshvanatha, here called Parshvabhatarika. And the role of I need to go farther down. Then the text, here we go. Then the text transitions to the narrative of the founding of the Ganga line in southern Karnataka, here in the text called Gangavadi. This narrative begins with the birth of King Padmaprabha. He, like Bharata, was unable to have a son. So he worshipped the local goddess Shasana Devate, who was the source, and this is a direct translation, the source of the king's power. Once he had attained her blessing, he had two sons who were named Rama and Lakshmana. After a while, an evil king named Mahipala from Ujjain attacked Vijayapura, their capital, and demanded Indra's ornaments, which we learned earlier was given to them directly by Indra. The threat enraged King Padmaprabha, so he called his sons and changed their names to Dadiga and Madhwa, and sent them away to the south in search for their own kingdom. When they came to Perur, they camped next to a Jain temple and were filled with devotion, bhakti. After circumambulating the temple 3 times and singing praises, they spotted a saint named Simhanandi, and after they paid him homage out of their bhakti, they told him about what had inspired. And Simhanandi at this point was obviously impressed, because after he heard their story, the guru took them under his wing and began to teach them. After a few days of instruction, as they performed her rituals, the goddess Padmavati appeared before them because of their devotion to her, and gave them a sword and the kingdom. As the guru looked on, Madhwa took the sword and sliced the stone pillar in 2, after which the saint placed crowns of flowers on them, performed the royal unction, and eventually appointed them as the rulers. And then the inscription continues forward a little bit, all the way up to the contemporaneous king Nanya. Sorry, I just want to make sure I have enough time here. So the inscription ends with the details of the grants, informing the reader that Nanya Ganga Paramadeva was renovating the temple first built by Dadiga and Madhwa and renaming it the Coronation Temple. It then details the lands that were attached to it, and the inscription concludes with another brief round of encomia of the king, in which he and his queen, called Patana Mahadevi, so also it could be the goddess of the royalty, are said to have likewise obtained a boon of sovereignty from Padmavati. The final narrative of Dadiga and Madhwa is the longest and most important, and the model upon which Nanya Ganga Paramati fashions his kingdom. The narrative of Dadiga and Madhwa focuses on the establishment of the local dynasty, finally situating the Ganga dynasty within its territory of the inscription. As such, it acts as a proper foundation narrative for the Ganga dynasty and displays the transfer of sovereignty from the local goddess to the Ganga brothers in the region in which they previously had no sovereign authority. Therefore, the narrative gives us a glimpse into the conceptualization of divine election and the subsequent transfer of sovereignty that reflects the narratives that we had talked about briefly in the Devi Mahatmya. In both the Puranic model and local inscriptions, it's clear that the rulers are elected by the goddess on the basis of superior devotion and proper enactment of devotional rituals. All right, I'm just going to stop there and go back to just talking. Okay, we can go to the next slide. All right, so there's several things that we need to talk about, and that is how a goddess operates within the system. And so we have here the poster, and it actually cuts it off because of the zoom, but actually at the bottom it mentions the kshetra of Padmavati. So when you're in Karnataka, this is something I only learned when I was there doing other historical research, but traveling from mutta to mutta, is that the muttas, which a lot of people know about, once you get there, they are discussed as being within distinct kshetras or territory of different goddesses. And the goddess Padmavati obviously is the ruler over her kshetra. And people like Lidke have written about the relationship between kshetra and kshatra, or kingship, the fact that territory and kingship are related concepts always. And so this led me to think more broadly about the role of goddesses. Oh, 2 minutes. Okay. The role of goddesses in being a sovereign over a physical space, but a physical space that's invigorated by their Shakti. So they rule over the spiritual domain that's laid over the physical domain. And you see this relationship like still in contemporary Karnataka, because each of these kshetras also have a local Bhattarika, which is this very interesting overlap of royal terminology that we get in the region. And Sarah Pierce Taylor has written about this in her dissertation, and hopefully in an upcoming book. So it's a very interesting overlap in which the earthly power and earthly sovereignty ultimately in Jain Dharma should be pushed away, but yet it's also elevated in this very interesting interplay of power. And the thing that I want to focus on, because when I teach Jainism, of course, in my introductory classes, it focuses on ahimsa, as most of us focus on. But yet the primary sources that I constantly read are quite violent. And talk about the ferociousness of the goddess, the fact that she invigorates conquest, and the right of conquest as part of sovereign authority is a recurring theme. When you go to the next slide, I'll push through it as well. So reflections that I had. The Jain goddess Padmavati and Jain goddesses / Yakshinis, Yakshis, whatever term you want to use, were central in the establishment of sovereignty within a local region. We can find this in a lot of inscriptions. What's interesting is this is a broader overlapping practice that we also see in Hindu traditions, which leads some people to say that, like, the goddess Chamundeshwari that I did my earlier research on used to be Padmavati. So when Venu's talking about in the question and answer period, these overlapping goddesses, this seems to be a pretty old debate that people were aware that these goddesses shared traits. Next, penultimately, Jain thought and practice influenced later Hindu courts. They seem to have established the model early on, at least in southern Karnataka, that eventually you'll see Hindu courts emulating their Stela Puranas. And finally, and one of the themes that I want to bring out in the Monsoon article is the concept of the place of ferocity within Jain Dharma, that it has a place in the Adi Purana and so forth, that we know that conquest has its place. Of course, it's not the ultimate Dharma, but it's there. And with that, you're doing the PowerPoint. We'll go to the last one, and that should just be questions. So if we had time for any questions, which I doubt we do, I could take them later. Well, thank you very much for your kind attention. And sorry, I'm a little
I have a quick question. If Sho, you could share that last image in the PowerPoint. It was striking that
So I'm not going now. I'm going tomorrow now.
No.
Sunny, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, he has to be dropped for that thing, na?
Okay. So if you could go to the last slide, the next one. The other one, the next one.
The questions one.
The question slide. That one, yes, hold there. Could you interpret the image as we see it?
Yeah, I actually was hoping if we had no questions, that's why I put it up here, because I also have a hard time with it. So if you look, I mean, it's pretty badly worn. And of course, it could also be Dharanendra just because of the hood. But it does appear that the character's legs are spread and that there's a vulva present. And it could just be how the rock is worn. But then you have this beautiful geometric design, which I had to cut off on the slide. It continues up. So I also, and perhaps Professor Nandagopal has some thoughts on this, but I assume that it's Padmavati. So it's just been sort of worn down and you can't really make out the breast as well.
And where is this from?
So these are all from Hambuja, the home, the center of her kshetra. And so this is why the Jinadatta inscription is also will be interesting to explore in more detail, because it's about the establishment of her kshetra and him establishing the Shantra line in Hambuja. And again, any questions about that, I'll defer to Professor Zeidmos because he's awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I want to introduce Professor Chudamani Nandagopal. And our paths have intersected various times. And Caleb and herself and myself were all in India at a conference on the goddess some time ago, which actually inspired me to think that we need to keep in communication with one another. And I'm so glad to welcome Professor Nandagopal back. We were both in India both in Delhi on fellowships in 2019. And she gave us her own personalized guided tour of the Archaeological Museum in Delhi, which I'll always cherish, those moments together. So Professor Nandagopal, the kshetra is now yours.
Namaskar, and thank you, Professor Chapple. I think I'll start sharing my all these three presentations that we have heard and seen, almost, it has given an introduction to what I'm going to speak and present here. So according to Jaina scholar, Professor Hampa Nagarajaya, the worship of Yaksha and Yakshi as Shasana Devatas was in existence by the 1st and 2nd century in Karnataka. The temples for Padmavati have been constructed in Karnataka, and her images are carved individually and enshrined them not only in the basadis, that is Jain temples of Parshvanatha Tirthankara, but also in the basadis of other Tirthankaras like Neminatha, Mahavira, and Chandraprabha. The earliest inscription belongs to Kadamba Ravivarma, dated 465 to 519 CE, at Gudnapur near Banavasi, registers a grant for the temple of Padmavati, Grama Padmalaya, Padmavatyalaya. Padmavati is also known as Totala, Tvarita, Nitya Tripura, Kamasadhini, Tripura Bhairavi, Chaturbhuja Devi. In some inscriptions, she is called Bhatari or Bhattari, Balari, Balahari, Padmavati Abbe, Jaki Abbe, Nokiyabbe, Lokiyabbe, Vasantika Devi, etc. Padmavati is described with all eminence in Kannada literature and Jaina texts like Mallisena's Bhairava Padmavati Kalpa, Nemichandra's Leelavati Prabandha, Parshva Pandita's Parshvanatha Purana, folk poet Dwarapala's Sthavanidya Padmavatiya Rathotsava. This refers to the chariot festival in the name of Padmavati. Nemichandra in his Leelavati Puranam refers to the iconography of Padmavati as one endowed with 4 arms, attributed with pasha, that is Puvina pasha, floral nose, phala, that is Hema phala, golden fruit, Vajra Ankusha, that is thunderbolt, and also sometimes she is shown with gold as hard as the diamond, and Padma, that is Kunkuma Padma, the red lotus. Pushpadanta mentions the 4 arms of Kunkuma colored Yakshi, comparing the 4 arms to the 4 Purusharthas, namely Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. The Sevanas have called themselves Padmavati Charana Saroja Bhringa. So one of the Aihole inscriptions dating 1182 mentions that Padmavati was the main deity of Aihole. For some like Santaras and Hoysalas, Yakshi Padmavati gained the status of tutelary deity. Hoysalas addressed her as Vasantika Devi. An epigraph from Chikamagaluru records Yakshi Padmavati acquired the name Vasantika as she was successfully invoked by the Jaina sage Sudita during the spring season. The Hoysala kings called themselves Vasantika Labda Varaprasada. So here in this slide, you are seeing the 5 Devis from Jaina tradition who are known as Panchakula Devi. That is Padmavati, Chakreshwari, Kushmandini, that is Ambika, Jwalamalini, and Siddhaini. They are the popularly known as Panchakula Devi. So Padmavati is one of these Panchakula Devi. Now we have Padmavati, which I'm going to analyze throughout this presentation, how the transformation of Yakshi Padmavati to the goddess Padmavati. So it is like in Digambara tradition of Jainism in Karnataka, we observe the 4 positions and status of Padmavati. One is Yakshi Padmavati in attendance with her consort, that is Dharanendra, positioning herself to the left of Jina Parshvanatha. Yakshi Padmavati in the 2nd level or 2nd stage as Parivara Devata in the shrines of Tirthankaras. She will be one of the, the deity associated with that particular Tirthankara. Or along with the other Tirthankaras, she is also placed as one of the Devata. In the 3rd stage, gaining the spiritual ascendance and emergence, the independent status as goddess. She acquires the independent status as goddess. And in the 4th, she has been characteristic feature of socio-cultural benevolence. And this is raising to the status beyond Jaina community, acquiring the status of goddess in the worshipping tradition in general. So in this sculpture or in this panel, you can see that in Badami, the 4th cave, Jaina cave, Padmavati is in the position in attendance to Parshvanatha. Also in Jinanathapura, the 12th century, where the Parshvanatha panel you have, and Yakshi Padmavati is in attendance. So continue with that position. You also see in Humacha, or Hombuja, but she is standing next to, the Parshvanatha and in attendance. Another beautiful Parshvanatha panel we have here in Hombuja, and you see that Padmavati with her attendant is, present there along with her consort Dharanendra. In the next, you see the transformation from subordinate position to premier position. That is what we see even in these panels or the depiction in the shrines. So she gets an elevated status in customary rituals. And so she becomes a prominent deity in the worshipping tradition. So here in one of this slide, you see the Mula Purusha or Mula Nayaka, who is the main deity, that is Parshvanatha, and he is flanked by Dharanendra and Padmavati in the Garbhagriha of Hombuja. And here you see that along with Parshvanatha, she is getting a kind of, a status, her own independent status for worship. She has been worshipped and offered saris and all those things happen here. And emerging as Parivara Devata, she is presented in many of these temples. And this is one of the 11th century temple, Lakkundi temple, which was known as Loki Gundi. Probably it is associated with the tree, Loki tree, which is a tree of Padmavati. So this was constructed by the Brahma Jinalaya, the Kalyan Chalukyan style, and Dana Chintamani Attimabbe, the queen, she has constructed this temple. And this is one epigraph we find, a very long epigraph which is in Old Kannada, and it records elaborately the great pious lady of legendary fame, Attimabbe. So Ponna, one of the great Kannada poet, and Ranna, they both in their works talk about this pious lady, Attimabbe. She chose Lokkigundi for her all munificent activities. Danachintamani Attimabbe lived during 950 to 1016, patronized the sculptors, architects, musicians, dancers, storytellers, warriors, orphans. So she was such a generous lady, and probably from her times we have more and more Parshvanatha temples where Padmavati has been worshipped. So she built 1,501 Jaina temples in and around Lokkigundi. Attimabbe was equated with the Jina Shasana Devi Padmavati and got the Birudu, that is the title, as Ghatantaki. Ghatantaki is more powerful and such strong, person. Out of the 1,501 temples, most of the time, they are all Parshva Basadis. So Padmavati, Dharana combined, they became popular as Ghatantaka Basadis. Attimabbe attained sainthood by the time that particular inscription has been installed. So she is also connected with mysterious powers. And this one sculpture, which has been consecrated at the time of Attimabbe, doesn't have the hood. Usually the single hood was there when she was in the attendance. But after that, she gets number of hoods, maybe 3 or 5 or 7. You find them in the iconography. But here you don't find a hood, but on the crown, you find the Parshvanatha image. So she is the Padmavati, the most beautiful sculpture that we have documented. So Dana Chintamani Attimabbe Award, it is a lifetime achievement award for a woman contributor in literature and culture. In memory of Attimabbe, Karnataka government has instituted this particular award. And you can see that this, the bronze image signifies or symbolizes Padmavati. And you can see that the Chandra and Surya, sun and moon, as long as sun and moon are there, Padmavati's, pious and the kind of, charity that she had made for the development of Jainism, it remains. That is what it signifies. And she is also holding the Jina, the image of Jina, Parshva. And she has distributed 100 Jina images, golden images studded with, precious stones to the scholars. And the other side, you see the palm leaves are, spread, and she has instituted 1000 Shantinatha Purana manuscript in those days in 12th century and distributed to people. So she was such a great, and she has been equated to Padmavati. So this award was given to me in as for my contribution by Government of Karnataka in 2019 and 20. So here, behind me is also that award I have placed here because it is so much connected to Padmavati. So Padmavati gaining importance in spiritual world, and she started getting herself into the ritualistic prominences. So these are the images we see in Akkana Basadi from Shravana Belagola. Now we start getting the shrines for Padmavati. May not be independent, but she is associated with other images like Tirthankaras. And here you can see that in Chikkabetta, that is Chandragiri, Shravana Belagola, you find number of images. At least in Shravana Belagola, we get 5 images of Padmavati. Padmavati images from Hirayangadi and also from Matada Basadi. It is a Matada Basadi monastery, and it is also Neminatha Basadi. In Neminatha Basadi, Padmavati is an important deity, and the ritual of oblation happens there. And this is again, as a Parivar Devata status, she attains in this particular Kere Basadi, that is a lake Basadi near Karkala. You see the Arati is taken and offered to Padmavati with flowers and Arati. That is on Fridays, special Fridays. And again, in every temple, in any temple in Jain temple, you find a Padmavati shrine, independent shrine. Other than that also, independent Padmavati shrines are found in many of the, even in a small village. That is why there is a proverb in Kannada known as Urgella Padmavati. So you find, wherever you see, you find a Padmavati. So that is the meaning of that Kannada proverb. So here you see Padmavati in Naravi, Tirthankara Basadi, Padmavati in Parshvanatha Basadi, and Padmavati is worshipped here in a shrine in Nittinakoppa, every place. And here Padmavati sometimes is shown along with all the other devatas like Jwalamalini and Kushmandini. But she stands because of her hood and because of her eminence. You can immediately see the greatness of Padmavati among all these. So we find many shrines have been kept like this, she has been beautifully draped in saris, flowers are offered, and it continues. This is one very interesting place we documented, known as Lokuru, where you find one Jain family with 300 members living even today. So we worked on this and documented. In that place, you have huge a temple where you find Durgava and Dhyamava. These are the two images, life-size images. Between them, they are the Grama Devatas. Between them, you find one Padmavati image, special image, because this family has worshipped Padmavati, coming to this temple and worshipping, and special processions are taken in the name of Padmavati, not Durgava Dhyamava. So she has such an important position. So coming to Hombuja, I am not discussing in detail because the next paper is mainly on Hombuja. So here, Padmavati is having an independent shrine. And there is a mantra for Padmavati that is known as the Bhairava Padmavati Kalpa of Malisha. Says that Om Hrim is the mantra for praying Parshvanatha, Dharanendra, and Padmavati. The seed syllabi, that is Hrim, is split into Hri, symbolic of Parshvanatha, R, symbolic of Dharanendra, and E represents the Yakshi Padmavati. So there are rituals for Padmavati, and they are most popular. And every basadi has these rituals and aratis and singing for Padmavati special, and also offering bangles. And she is the symbol of Saubhagya, non-widowhood also. So here you can see the Loki tree behind the Hombuja, and the stele which shows the entire story, how she was placed as the main deity by Jinadattaraya, and that's that inscription which my previous speaker referred, you find here under this particular stele. So this is the Friday Padmavati ritual. People will be offering the flowers. You see the way how she is decorated, and they will be watching whether one flower will fall on the right side. So when it falls on the right side, they feel that whatever they have come, for what purpose, that has been attained. So much of significance. She is the benevolent and boon-giving goddess here, and she becomes the goddess having all the rituals. Another place, it is called as Padmavatiya Sthala. That means it is the source space for Padmavati, that is known as Vadanabailu. And there you don't find the image of Padmavati, but you find an anthill. So anthill is offered with sari, dressed and draped and all that, worshipped, because anthill is so auspicious and Padmavati is the snake goddess. And here you see the main temple is built for Padmavati, that is in Mudbidre, in the Mathada Raste, that is the road where the Jain Matha and Chudamani, Tribhuvana Tilaka Chudamani, Vasadi is there. You have one Padmavati, that is Padmavati temple. Such beautifully she has been, ornated and decorated, and with all her, the iconography and features and everything. And whereas the Parshvanatha becomes smaller deity here in front of such, huge Padmavati. And one temple is coming up in Krishnagiri, Parshva Padmavat temple. And here you see that Parshvanatha is the main deity, but Padmavati, you find different forms of Padmavati. They have built different niches or different, places for worshipping these different forms of Padmavati. Still it is going on. Construction is still going on. So I would like to bring to your kind notice that all this study, what we have undertaken for Jaina, or study of Jainism in Karnataka, is because of this project, that is Museum of Jain Philosophy by Sri Firodia Trust, Pune. So we worked the project, research and documentation of Jainism in Karnataka. For almost 2 years, we worked on this, documented, I think more than 400 Jaina temples we have identified, and surveyed all the districts of Karnataka. And the 4 volumes that we have worked, it's not published, we have submitted to the trust. They are coming up with a huge museum in the Lonavala, near Lonavala, Bombay. And I think they are going to, if someone visits there, they can find entire literature and documentation of Jainism in that particular museum of the whole country. So we were assigned the work of Karnataka to document, and this is my research team. They all worked with me, and within 2 years, we completed this particular project. And it is almost 2,000 pages worth of material, and it was such a great work for us. And that is what I shared with Christopher Chapple when I met him in Delhi. And this is, we can bring out many things out of this material that we have collected on Jainism. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my thought, and the team we had, and we all worked. And I could see Professor Nalini Rao, Professor Shimkhada, and Professor Kak. We all, in 2006, I think it was Sangama conference in the same Marymount University. We all presented, and it was a great time we all had. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have time for one question.
I saw the
Nalini Rao, yes.
Hi.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Nalini. Yes.
How do you relate? It's such a wonderful research on Padmavati in Jainism, but how do you relate that to the Padmavati in Tirupati, where one has to go to that of Vishnu's? And as we know that even the sculpture of Vishnu in Tirupati was formerly a Jain. It is said, of course, all that research was hushed up. But what is the date, and how does it travel there? And are there Padmavati images in Andhra?
Yeah. One is like, the Balaji or the Tirupati. As we all know that, still it is controversial, and still we are not unable to give the conclusion that that is a Jaina figure. Still, because one Professor S.K. Ramchandra Rao, he sat in the Garbhagriha of Balaji for almost 3 to 4 days alone and studying the entire iconography without any ornamentation. So according to him, it is Vaishnava image. And Padmavati, we have the story and other things that is related to Vaishnavism. And I think we are not connected with the Jain Padmavati and that Padmavati. Even the iconography and the context, everything is different. Only the name is common to both. So maybe more research, if we undertake, maybe we will be able to give a clear picture of this.
because
Thank
they don't allow you to see all sculptures there at all.
Yeah, true. Thank you for the question, Nalini.